Morning everyone, welcome to Needles, Thread and Little Betty. My name's Mandy, this is Little Betty. You may have met Little Betty before if you've seen my other couple of videos. You don't always see a lot of her on the videos because she's usually playing around my feet. If she's not on my knee, she will be around my feet somewhere because she very rarely leaves my side. Very loyal, aren't you, Little Betty? Very needy. Today we're going to make a Christmas rag quilt, and I'm very excited about this because I've never made a rag quilt before. And I guess if you don't see this video, then it's not turned out too well. But how hard can it be? I mean, I've made quilts, I've done blocking, I've done English paper piecing, all of that, and it should be a little bit easier, so the proof will be in the pudding, so to speak. To make a rag quilt, basically, from what I gather, and this is how I'm going to do it, is you make individual quilt sandwiches, and obviously I'll explain that as we go along, and you sew them together in a way that the seams are facing upwards, and which is usually against what you're doing with sewing, because you usually hide these seams away, but these face upwards. And what you do then is you do a little technique to kind of fluff them out or fray them out, and then once you've done all of that, you give it a good wash, and then did you hear that? I've got another dog, Hilda, who you won't see a lot of, but she's sort of running in and out. But anyway, yeah, so you kind of, once you've given it a wash, it kind of fluffs those frayed edges up a bit more, hence you have a rag quilt. So what I'll do is I'll get all my bits and pieces together and I'll see you in a minute. Hi, so I'm back with the fabrics that I want to use for this project. So the rag quilt will be square blocks patchwork together. So each individual block will be a quilt sandwich, and for a quilt sandwich what you have is you have 2 layers of fabric with a piece of wadding, batting, whatever you want to call it, in between as kind of like the cushioning, and that's basically a quilt sandwich. So the rag quilt will be, in the design that I want to do, in the size that I want to do, will be a patchwork of quilt sandwiches, if that makes sense. Okay, so for the top part, what I've decided to do is I'm going to do a bit of a pattern, a bit of a design, so I'm going to use different fabrics for the top, and the fabrics I've chosen, I've got a variety of fabrics here. I might not use them all. These are fat quarters. They're not all from the same bundle, they're just ones that I've picked out. But also I wanted to incorporate this because I've got an idea of fussy cutting around the flowers, the poinsettias, and just doing my square around those and just fixing them into the pattern that I want to do. I've got an idea in my head of how I want the pattern to be, but I'm kind of, that could change, so we'll see how that goes. But once I've cut out all the blocks, all the squares that I want, I will be putting them up on the design board at the back, and then I can move them around and just kind of see what kind of design I want for the top of it. So although the top part's going to be different combinations of fabric to make up a pattern, the bottom part I wanted just plain. And for the bottom fabric, I've chosen this, which is very traditional, kind of, it's just like the hollies with the berries, some pine cones, a bit of pine on there. And although that is one quite large piece of fabric, I will be cutting it up into the sizes that I want to make the bottom of the quilt sandwich. And because I've got the two, obviously the two layers, like with any quilt, It is reversible, so you can use it any side. The only difference is because you're going to have the rag part at the top of the quilt, or the main part of the quilt where the pattern is you won't have that design underneath, if that makes sense. Hopefully it will all come together. So with your fabrics, what you need to do is decide how big you want to have your quilt and to cut the blocks out accordingly. I'm going to do a lap quilt. This is my first rag quilt, so it will be a lap quilt, which is, it's going to be nice for just sitting on the settee and cozying up, watching you Christmas movies and a bit of mulled wine and all of that. So that would be nice, and as a starter for this quilt. And I've decided that what I'm going to do is cut out blocks of for the fabrics. There'll be 6-inch blocks I'm going to be cutting out, so the quilt will be sort of, it will finish at about 5.5 inches each block. Okay, and so each part of the fabric, the top fabrics and the bottom fabrics, will be 6 inches. I shall cut all them out, and I think I'm going to do it sort of so I've got kind of like 8x10, so I've got the 8 blocks are going across the top and the 10 blocks down the side. That could change, but that's what I'm aiming for. Because I'm doing that with the outer blocks, the inner blocks, the wadding, and I've already cut these out. I think I've cut 80 of these out. They need to be slightly smaller, so I'm only cutting them at 5 inches. And what the reason for that is when you do the seams together and you're cutting and fluffing and fraying them up, it'll only be the fabric that, you might have a little bit of this popping out, but it will be mainly the fabric itself that will be coming out and fluffing up and fraying. Okay, this won't fray. So they need to be smaller. I mean, you can do whatever size squares for the patchwork that you want. You can make it as big as you want. You may have made rag quilts before, so you could do it. I mean, it'd look lovely on a bed, wouldn't it? But so you can do whatever you want, and you can make smaller ones for children. So it's entirely up to you what sort of size you want to do it. I'm going to stick with the plan. This is my first one, so I'm going to stick with the plan and let's see how it goes. So the first thing I'm going to do is start cutting, because I've got a lot of blocks to cut out. I've already, like I said, cut the wadding out, so I've got 80 of those. So I'm going to need 80 of the top fabrics, which is going to be a bit tricky if I'm not sure what design I'm going to do, but I'm just going to keep cutting blocks to see what happens. And obviously 80 of the bottom fabrics, and that doesn't matter because that's all the same, so just 80 of those. Okay, the other thing to remember is all the fabrics I've chosen are non-directional, so it doesn't matter if you've got, I'm guessing if you've got something that's a certain way up, then you need to think about that and how many blocks that you need. We'll come to that a bit more when it comes to sewing them together. Okay, but first of all, I'm going to get cutting. It's going to take me a while, so I'll see you later. Okay, bye. It's a few days and a haircut later. I've cut out all of the squares that I need for this quilt. I've laid out the top layer on my design board, as you can see. I'm really pleased with the pattern. let me know in the comments below what you think. I really like it. I really like it. Did change from the original amount that I said. I think I said I was going to do an 8x10, and only slightly smaller. It's a 7x9, and the reason I changed is because with this sort of layout, I wanted one in the middle, and I needed to have an odd number to do that. So it's turned out to be an 8x9. That's about 63 squares of each of your top, your bottom, and your wadding fabrics. Okay, so putting it on the design board is a brilliant idea that I got from another YouTube channel that I watch, The Last Homely House. I'm sure you've probably seen it. It's brilliant, very popular. If you haven't, you need to check it out. And if I remember, I'll put the link in the description. But Kate, who runs the channel, she has a design board. And basically, all it is pieces of polystyrene covered. I've covered mine in like a really thin wadding, which my husband placed on. This is a slide door wardrobe. This wardrobe was here when we moved in this bungalow, and it's just ideal for putting that on. Obviously, if the quilt I want to make or something is wider than that, then I've got to be a bit creative, but that's just perfect. And the great thing about a design board is you can pin things to it if you want to, because you've got the polystyrene. But with something like this, the fabrics are pretty light. The wadding just holds them. So you just pop it on. That's it. And they stay there. And because I've spent like a couple of days cutting out, doing other things, having my hair cut, this was on here. I cut these out first. This was on here a couple of days ago. I can keep walking in and out and just having a look and thinking, yeah, I might change this, I might move this to there, or whatever you want to do. So that's really great, because you can just stand there and look at it. That's lovely. So the next thing we're going to do is create the quilt sandwiches. And to do that, we need to take one of the top layers, one of the bottom layers, and we've got a piece of wadding to go in the middle. Let's take that off there. So we're just going to place the wadding, which is small. If you remember, it's smaller than the fabrics, in the middle, like that, and we're going to quilt them together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all across the top row first and just do it row by row. Keep them in piles. I mean, you can number the piles if you want to, just to make sure you don't lose that pattern that you've created. So I'm going to do row at a time, like that, and just sew them together. The way I'm going to sew them, and I've watched a few tutorials on a rag quilt, because this is the first one I've ever made, is with your quilt sandwich, I'm going to sew from one corner to the other, and you'll end up with a crisscross. So from this corner down to this one, and then this corner down to this one, so you've got a cross shape. And I'm going to do that on each of the squares. Okay. And once I've done all that, then we can start looking at putting each of the rows together. Okay. So I'm going to get the machine set up, and I'll see you in a minute. My machine is all set up, and I've already started doing a few of the quilt sandwiches already. So I've done the first two rows of the design, and I'm just started on the second row. I'm using a light grey thread because it's kind of neutral with all the colours that I've got. If you were using something, say, that's from one end of the spectrum to the other, such as something black and white, then you might need to think about changing the colour of your thread, depending on what you might want, white cotton on black or black cotton on white, depending what you want. For me, that's not going to happen because they're not really my colour combinations in things like that. You might think, oh, you're wearing a black and white top. I'm not actually. It's navy and white. That's fine. So I'm just putting my quilt sandwich under my needle, put my needle down. And as I said, I'm just going to sew from one corner to the other. Nice and straight. If you're a little bit sort of not confident with doing straight lines, you can use some chalk or a erasable pen or something, air eraser, to just mark them out first. It's entirely up to you. What I'm going to do, because I've got a lot of squares to do, is as I'm coming to the end of the line on one square, I'm going to pop the other one, the next one, remembering to keep them in order, next to the needle ready. So I'm going to, what's called chain piecing, I'm going to come off one and straight onto the other. Now, if you want to do that way, it just makes it like tiny bit quicker. If you want to do that, you just need to remember to get your quilt sandwiches ready in advance so you can just move them over. Okay. I mean, you could do it if I've got a lot of things around here, but if you've got a lot of space, you could just get the whole row up and then just like a conveyor belt, really, just get them off. Okay. And then once you've got your chain, you could end up with a row of them like that. But once you've got your chain, all you've got to do then is just snip in the middle. Okay. And remembering to put them in a pile. I've been putting them in a pile for each of the rows, and I've numbered. So the row across the top is pile number 1, the row across the next one is pile number 2. It's up to you. You don't have to do that. That's just me, so I don't get it all in one big muddle at the end. So you do that for each quilt sandwich, and then once you've done all of that on one side, you've done all of your rows, then basically you need to turn them round, needle in, and do the line the opposite way. All the way to the end to the corner. And then what you'll finish up with, you probably can't see it on there. You might, if I move it with the light, you just have a crisscross throughout each square. So you need to do that for all your squares. And then once you've done that, I'll show you what you need to do next. I'll crack on. Oh, that's nice. So it's a little bit later on. I've done lots of sewing. I've had my lunch. It's gone up a little bit dark in here. I don't know if you can notice that, but we're in the middle of November almost, and it's absolutely teeming it down out there. It's been mild so far up until now, and we've got another storm. I can't remember the name of this one, but it hasn't stopped raining. I expect there'll be some local flooding because it's just been panning it down all day. So nice and cozy in here, perfect conditions for sewing. Sorry if you've been out and you've been stuck in it. So I've sewn together all the squares, 63 of them all together with the crisscross with the quilting part. I had them all in piles, 9 piles, 1 for each row, and 7 in each pile for each block for in the design that I put on the board in the first place, so in the order of the design, and I labelled the each pile so I knew which order they were in. What you could do if you didn't do it like that, or if you just forgot, what you could do, and I did do this but I didn't mention it before, is just take a photograph once you've put the little squares on your board. Just take a photograph of what it looks like. Then if you got in a bit of a muddle, at least then you can just look at the photo and put yourself right. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is start sewing the each block together to form a row. And if you look at the design board behind me, you can see that I've already started to do that. And not quite finished. I've got another couple of rows to do. I just had a bit of a head start. So to do that, the pile, I'm going to do it, I've been doing it a pile at a time. So the pile I'm going to work on and the order that they're in, I'm just taking the top two blocks, placing them next to each other together. So the backing fabrics are facing each other. The top fabrics are both on the outside. You've just got the backing fabrics facing each other. And the reason we need to do that is because if you remember, we need to have the seams showing on the top part of the quilt. Okay. So we're going to sew down one side, hold the two squares together next to each other. And we're just going to sew down one side at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. A lot of the time when you're doing quilting or if you're doing craft projects, it's kind of standard to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. But for this project, we're going to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And the reason that we do that is so that when the seams are facing the top, what we're going to do is we're going to snip at them and fray them and fluff them up, hence the rag quilt. And to do that, we just need to have a little bit more than 1/4 inch. Okay, so I'm going to pop this in my machine because it's quite bulky now. I mean, you've got 2 layers of wadding in there as well. Even though the wadding's smaller, it might just have worked its way into the seam allowance slightly, so that it can be quite bulky. So I've changed my foot to a walking foot. And what the walking foot does is, as it says, it kind of walks its way along the fabric, and that kind of keeps it sort of nice and smooth. Whereas if you had your normal foot and it's kind of trying to hold that bulk down, it might just pucker and gather a little bit, and we don't want that. Okay, so I've put the walking foot on and put my needle in, foot down, and I'm just going to sew all the way to the end, remembering it's a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And now you've got your two facing each other with your seam at the top. Okay. Some of the tutorials, I watched a couple of tutorials. Some just sort of left the seams and some sort of like press them open a little bit. I'm just going to finger press them open a little bit. I'm not going to iron them. The reason I've chose to do that, and what I saw, it didn't quite explain it, but I just thought that would be easier when I sew the rows together to kind of line them up. So that's what I'm doing. We'll soon find out if it works or not anyway. So I've done that for 2 of them. And then the next one, remembering that they're in the order of the design. Again, outer fabrics on the outs, the top of the fabric on the outside, the 2 backing fabrics next to each other, hold them straight, and again, underneath the machine, needle down, 1/2 inch seam allowance, all the way to the end. And you just keep doing that until you've done each. Hello, little Betty, come here. The little Betty keeps coming in and out. Yeah, she tries to sit on my knee when I'm sewing, but it's not very safe for her to do that. I know, I've neglected you a bit today. So you just continue doing that until you've got your row of 7. And as you can see, I've started to place them out, because when it comes to sewing all the rows together, which will be the next step, there's another I've got another dog in here. Come here, come on. Yes, you want some fuss. Oh, I've got another dog, a collie. You probably can't see her, but she's not a well dog, so she doesn't like a lot of fuss. And Betty, being a lot younger, Betty's about 19 months now, something like that, 20 months, and she likes to play all the time. So that was that noise that you heard. Anyway, so I forgot what I was saying now. Yeah, the rows. We're going to be sewing all the rows together, and making sure that we line the seams up as much as possible. Otherwise, it's just going to look wonky. I mean, I guess the thing with a rag quilt is if it's slightly out, you're not really going to notice that much. That's what I'm hoping. Because as I said before, this is my first one. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to finish doing these last 2 rows, and then I'll come back to you in a second and we'll start putting the rows together. All right. Okay. So I've finished sewing all the squares together to make the rows, and I've pinned each row onto the design board, making sure that I've got the pattern that I wanted in the first place, which I have. Very pleased with it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew each of these rows together to make one big piece. I'm going to start with the top row. And then the second row, another pin in there. And I'm going to hold these 2 together, the same as we did each square when we were making the rows, with the backing fabrics together and the top fabrics on the outside. And then I'm going to, just on one side of the 2 rows is pin or clip. I'm going to use little clips, each of these together. What you need to be careful of is making sure that the seams marry up together. So if you can see, we've got the seams each side. I'm just going to pop a clip holding those 2 seams together just to keep them straight and nice and even. I guess if they're a slight bit out, it wouldn't make too much difference because we're going to be ragging up the seams anyway, but it's going to be obvious if they're quite a bit out. So just try your best to get them, or I'm going to try my best to get them nice and neat and married up together. Okay. Might be easier said than done, we'll see. So once you've done that with your first 2 and you've sewn them together, again, your half-inch seam allowance, we're sticking with a half-inch seam. What we're going to do is when it's all big, because as you go down the rows, you're going to have one big piece of quilt, which is what we want. So once we've got that and all the rows are sewn together, I'm then going to sew a line all the way around the outside. In fact, I'm going to do 2. And that's just to hold it in to make sure it's secure, okay? I guess you could bind that if you wanted to, but I'm not going to do that. I can't really see the point in binding it. I suppose it's your own preference, but I shall rag up the outside seam as well as the inside seams, okay? So I'm going to get on and sew these together and get one big piece and sew all the way around the outside, and I'll come back to you in a bit. Still raining, by the way. just mentioned before I got to the end, which just occurred to me as I'm going along. When you're sewing the rows together, just sew each one from opposite directions. Sometimes with some projects, you should sew them in the same direction if you're doing straight lines. Certainly, small projects, I always do. But if it's something, if you've got long rows, you should sew them really in opposite directions because it helps even them out. And if you sew them all in the same direction, it kind of makes them kind of skew with curve in one direction. So to balance it out, you sew each row in opposite directions, if that makes sense. The other thing I've noticed as I'm sewing along, because I'm sewing these seams open and I've got them as I've been clipping them out, obviously I take the clip off as I come to the seam. Sometimes they tend to curl up a little bit at the back. So I've just been stopping just before I get to the seam just to double check that they're still open. And I noticed a couple of them are curved, so I've just opened them again before I actually sew over. So it might be worth just checking as you come to each seam that both sides are still open quite flat. Okay, so I'll just carry on. I'm almost at the end of this one now. It's amazing when you just sew in straight lines, how much cutting you're getting through. I've had to change the reel twice already. But just be careful and bear in mind that as well, because otherwise you'll be sewing for ages and ages, and when you pick it up, it won't be attached. So yeah, just keep your eye on your bobbin. All right, I'll crack on. I'm just coming to the end of sewing all the way around the outside of the quilt. I've already gone round once and now I'm doubling it up just to make sure that it's secure. Just coming to the last bit. And that's all the sewing finished. So the next thing I need to do is, we've got all these seams. They're already starting to fray a little bit, so that's helpful with the ragging process. So the next thing that I'm going to do is have a sharp pair of scissors, and I'm just going to cut along all the seams, all the inner ones, all the outside ones. Just make a little snip, and snips about 1/2 inch apart, just close up to the stitching, but obviously avoiding the stitching. We don't want to be cutting through the stitching at all. Just enough to just make the seam so that we can kind of rough them up afterwards. Okay, nice pair of sharp scissors. I don't know if, I'm not really sure if 1/2 inch is kind of the standard for doing this. I'm not sure. As I said, this is my first one, but that's what I'm doing anyway, just all the way along. And these are nice and sharp because these are my dressmaking scissors. There's all debates and things going around about what scissors you should have, and you shouldn't cut paper and cardboard with your fabric scissors, which I don't. That's my preference. I mean, different people do different things. It's up to them, really. I don't really mind what people do. But I remember a while ago I was on this Facebook group. I can't remember the name of the group. I'm not in it now. And there was a big debate which turned into a bit of an insulting argument, really, about people, whether they should use the same scissors or different scissors. It was really, really silly. And it got to the point where somebody had put some words to the effect of, okay, so all you snobs out there with more than one pair of scissors. And I thought, okay, that's my time to leave the group.
get on with it. But anyway, I don't think I'm a snob because I've got more than one pair of scissors, but that's I have. It's just my preference. So I'm going to be doing this all the way along here, and once I've done all of that, I'll just show you what it looks like before I go to the final stages, which is giving it a good wash and then putting it in the tumble dryer, and that will just help fluff everything up. But I'll just show you what it looks like just before I do that. That will probably be a bit later on because I'm going out in a bit to I'm going to a craft fair with my daughter-in-law in Leicestershire. I live in Leicestershire. This is the other side of Leicestershire. So I shall be going to that in a bit. So I don't know if I'll get this done before I go, but if I do, I'll show you what I've done. But if not, it will be when I get back. All right. See you in a bit. So that didn't take as long as I thought it would take. I've gone all the way around the outside. Little snips around, sort of ½ inch. Some might be a little bit more, some might be a little bit less. I don't expect it has to be that even, not for a rag quilt. And I've done all the inside, all the inner seams. I did all the ones going one way and then organised myself to go across the other way. And the only thing that I'd do next time is I'd use a smaller pair of scissors. It's made my wrist ache a little bit, all that snipping. But yeah, so I'm going to go and put it in the washing machine, give it a good wash. Only a cool wash, I think. I think that should be fine. And then I'm going to put it in the tumble dryer. Again, probably a cool tumble dryer, just to fluff all these frayed bits up and make them fray a little bit more. And then I'll come back to you. Will be after I've been to the craft fair, of course. Still raining, by the way. So hopefully I can get there without using a boat. See you in a bit. Bye. It's finished. Washed and tumble dried. Washing it in the tumble dryer effect gives it that kind of nice crumpled look, which complements the ragging that you've done on the seams. So that looks really good, makes it look very cosy indeed. A few loose fibres at the moment. I'll just pin it on the board. What do you think? I really like it. The only really regret that I have is that it's not big enough. I mean, it's a lap quilt, so it's fine. But what I think I should have done, because I wanted the odd number, instead of going down to 7, 9, I should have done 9, 11, because I don't think I allowed enough for the seam allowance. You got ½ inch seam allowance on all the squares, so potentially you've lost around 3.5 inches across the top and with down the bottom. So that's made it a lot smaller. So something to learn for next time. And I will be doing another one because I really enjoyed it and I love the effect that it gives. So let me know what you think. Please think about putting a comment down, or if you've got a photograph of one that you've done, if you've done lots, put that in. I'd love to see what you do. Think about, if you want to, please subscribe. If you want to see another video, you can press the alert and that will let you know when another video has been published. And think about giving me a thumbs up. That's always quite nice. So I'll be back again in a couple of weeks with something quite different. I'm not going to tell you what, but it will be quite different to what I've done so far. Okay, so I'll see you soon. Bye.